All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for this Folklife Apprenticeship information session. My name is Ryan Koons, and I am MSAC Folklife Specialist, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you this afternoon. We like to begin all public meetings of the Maryland State Arts Council with some grounding documents by way of introducing us to you, our audience and constituents. And following the best practices of accessibility, I will be reading these aloud. First up is our land acknowledgement statement. This derives from our MSAC land acknowledgement project, in which we formally consulted with tribal peoples whose lands are claimed by Maryland, compensating them for their time, in order to create a series of public land acknowledgement statement resources available to you on MSAC's website under the Resources tab. This includes information on land acknowledgement statements, best practices on creating them, as well as maps, tribal histories, key concepts, and a whole lot of other really interesting and useful information. So if you have not done so already, do please check it out. Out of that project came this land acknowledgement statement that you see before you, which I will read now. We acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are home of its first peoples, the Accohanic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Chopticco Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nassau-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Kanoi Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee, and the tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. MSAC's Equity and Justice Statement. The arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council, or MSAC from here on out, and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Our vision. MSAC plays an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And our mission. Maryland State Arts Council advances the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. We have 5 institutional goals. They are to increase participation, to provide intentional support, 3, to build capacity, 4, to leverage connections, and 5, to bolster Maryland arts. You can find more information on these goals on our website, msac.org. Today, we invite you to engage with us using this series of creative meeting actions. They are to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, to engage with everyone's presence as a gift, to acknowledge that together we know a lot, to enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, to share your idea and trust that it will be heard, to use I statements such as I think or I feel, to focus your language on the task at hand, to hold one another accountable with care, to apply yes and, as in I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it, and to balance speaking and listening. MSAC makes a variety of professional development opportunities available to residents of the state of Maryland. These include topic-specific sessions on, for example, financial marketing, financial management, legal advice, marketing strategies, strategic planning, board engagement, and much more. Today's webinar is one such example of the professional development that we offer. We also have public forums for folks to communicate with us, such as Coffee with the Council, which is a bi-monthly public virtual space that folks can access for free on Tuesdays. Also a variety of creative conversations, regional arts summits, and the statewide Maryland Arts Summit. If you are not already connected to our mailing list, do please sign up at the link at the bottom of the screen, tinyurl.com/MSAC's mailing list. You can also sign up on msac.org. As many of you know, we are very fortunate this year to have an additional $40 million in COVID arts relief funding. And this year, more than ever, we need you to join us as panelists. Panelists are vital to the work that we do. They help us figure out where funding dollars, state tax dollars, are going to go in arts funding around the state. And this year, because of that COVID Arts Relief Fund, we need panelists more than ever. We have a variety of public calls for each MSAC program available across the year, and this month, August 2022, we actually have our Maryland Traditions call for panelists out for this fiscal year. So if you are interested in adjudicating applications for the Folklife Network and Folklife Apprenticeship and award nominations for the Heritage Award, do please sign up. Do please apply to be a panelist. We would love to have you on board. We need to have you on board. Applications are available in Smart Simple. You can find more information on our website under the About tab. And do please note that this is paid work. We ensure that folks are able to be paid for the time that they work this stuff. It's usually a $350 flat rate with additional fees for different programs, depending on the number of grants and the amount of time. If you have any questions about this, do please be in touch. We are happy to answer any questions you might have. Without further ado, let's dive in. This is a roadmap of today's webinar. I'll provide an overview of the Folklife Apprenticeship Program. We'll talk about the nuts and bolts of applying, review some application strategies, and then answer any questions that you might have. Do please keep track of your questions. Feel free to put them in the chat if you wish as we go along, or keep track of them and share them at the end verbally. We're open to either. As I mentioned, we have this amazingly nationally unprecedented arts relief funding available to folks in the Maryland arts sector this year. And the takeaway is that MSAC has a large amount of money that we want to get out the door, and it has to go out, the entirety of that $40 million has to go out as arts grants, which is very, very, very exciting. So we ask that you please, please, please apply, and please help us spread the word. If you know of any artists who've been thinking about, maybe I want to do this project, this might be the year. We've got the money to help. So please help us get the word out, and do please apply. Now, without further ado, Folklife Apprenticeship, I know many of you are familiar with it, but I'll go over it all the same. This program supports education in the traditional arts, specifically by funding a pedagogical relationship between a master artist and an apprentice artist. This is a $5,000 flat grant, and it's open to any residents in the state of Maryland. Both master artists and apprentice artists need to be residents of Maryland. And it's open to anyone in what we call the traditional arts, which in-house we define as any community-based living cultural tradition handed down by example or word of mouth. And this deliberately broad definition includes a wonderfully rich variety of traditions across dance, music, performance, and theater traditions, costuming, craft, food, visual arts, as well as agricultural, architectural, maritime, aquaculture, and healing arts. We fund, as you see throughout the photos, a wide range of traditions that has included Baltimore Club, Hindustani music, oyster harvesting, traditional American Indian beading practices. This year, for the first time, we actually have a healing arts folklife apprenticeship that is African diasporic birth work, which we're very excited about. Variety of song and instrumental musical traditions, dance traditions. The sky's the limit. So if you're interested and are concerned that what you do might not be considered traditional, do please be in touch. Eligibility for the Folklife Apprenticeship does rest primarily on Maryland residency. Unfortunately, we are not able to fund anyone who lives outside of the state of Maryland. And we require that the master artist, or ask rather, excuse me, that the master artist be able to demonstrate some vital contribution to their particular cultural tradition. Because every tradition is so different, and because the list I mentioned earlier is so varied, what those particular vital contributions are will look very different between oyster harvesting and Hindustani dance. But it must be something that within the context of the culture, folks consider to be important and vital. Apprentice artists are students, so we don't want them necessarily to be masters, but we do request that they demonstrate some kind of prior experience within the context of that tradition, at least minimum a basic skill level, and a commitment to long-term learning within that particular cultural tradition. And again, because each cultural traditional context is different, those skill sets and experiences will look different context by context. Panelists are going to be reading through applications and adjudicating based on 5 different criteria. They are listed here. They are first, the traditional nature of the proposed form of folklife. In what way is this form of folklife a tradition? How is it deemed a tradition? And again, very wide variety of options there. Second criterion is the expertise of the master artist. How are they a master? What experiences do they have that have made them a master? Sometimes that will include some kind of formal training. Many times it will not. Maybe it will include some kind of informal training. Growing up in the tradition, having practiced it for decades, again, the sky's the limit. The third criterion is the preparedness of the apprentice artist. What kind of experiences have they had? What is their basic skill level set? What is their commitment to engaging with this tradition through and beyond the Folklife Apprenticeship? The fourth review criteria is the potential impact of the apprenticeship on the continued vitality of the tradition. And what ways will the existence of this apprenticeship help ensure that this tradition will be maintained going forward, is the kind of the question behind the question there. And fifth is the feasibility of the work plan. Folklife apprenticeships are funded for maximum 1 year, and essentially we want to know if you are planning to do something that is feasible to be done within 1 single year. And again, because traditions vary, what is considered feasible within a tradition will also vary. We are very fortunate this year, as I mentioned, because of that COVID Arts Relief Fund, to be able to offer a special one-time cycle of the Folklife Apprenticeship. This is a little different for folks who have applied in previous cycles. This is a one-off. This is only happening this year, and then we will return to our regularly scheduled annual cycle, which I'll talk about in a moment. But for this one-time special fiscal 2022-23 Arts Relief cycle, we are going to be opening applications for an entire 6-month period, September 1, 2022 through February 28, 2023. And folks are welcome to apply at any point during that 6-month period. Panelists will be evaluating monthly, and then we will be notifying and processing funding for successful awardees, again, on a monthly rolling basis. So this timeline is really for folks who want to jump into their apprenticeship programs now. Excuse me, with the expectation that activities will begin, pedagogical activities will begin before June 30th, 2023. So again, this is very flexible. And thanks to the COVID Arts Relief Fund, we are hoping to fund up to 30 Folklife apprenticeships through this program. So we're very, very excited about it. And as I mentioned earlier, we do currently have a call for panelists open. So if you're interested in doing panel work for this program, please do apply. If you're interested in doing panel work and also interested in applying for the program itself, that is also an option. We are able to seat panelists whose applications are in the mix. It's very simple, just that when your application is up for discussion, if it is your application as a panelist, you will simply mute yourself and not participate in any way during that application review. You will recuse yourself. So this is, again, special one-time only. Come and get it now while it's here. This year available, Arts Relief-funded Folklife Apprenticeship. We also have, in addition to that, our usual annual cycle of the Folklife Apprenticeship. This is for folks who are interested in beginning a Folklife Apprenticeship activities beginning no earlier than July 1st, 2023, so next year. Because of the COVID Arts Relief Fund special cycle, we have pushed the annual cycle of applications back within our calendar, and we will be opening applications for folks to apply beginning March 20th, 2023, closing April 28th, 2023, reviewing applications in May of 2023, and then notifying applicants of status and beginning to process the funds next July 2023. This will look much more like it has in previous years for folks who are familiar with the program, but the nuts and bolts of making the application, the questions that folks have to answer, the ways in which you can apply are otherwise all the same. It's just the schedules and the availability of funds that change. If you are interested in making an application for the Folklife Apprenticeship, we strongly encourage you to do so after you review the Folklife Apprenticeship grant guidelines. If you're not already familiar with MSAC grants, please be aware that every single one of our grant programs has what we call grant guidelines associated with it. They more or less function as the Bible for that particular grant program, everything and anything you might want and need to know about the program. All of grant guidelines are each available in a quick resources box at the top of the applicable grant program page on our website, msac.org, and the Folklife Apprenticeship program is no exception. You will see on this screenshot I've placed two blue arrows pointing both to the quick resources box at the top of the page, and then another blue arrow that is pointing to the guidelines themselves. The guidelines are a PDF document. I confess it's great bedtime reading. It's not the most exciting information in the world, but it does contain a lot of very useful information, including eligibility, questions about who to contact information, and most importantly, perhaps, it includes the questions that you will need to answer if you're making an application, as well as word counts available in that response. So for folks who want to get started before the application is open September 1st, you may do so, and all the information you need is available through the grant guidelines on the program webpage. Once you've reviewed the application materials through the grant guidelines, all applications can be made through Smart Simple, which is MSAC's grants management application. It's available online. It's also linked in the grant guidelines and on our website. And if you are not already registered in that system, you are welcome to do so at the register button here in the bottom left-hand corner. On this screenshot, I've placed two red arrows at the register button. Do please note that Folklife Apprenticeships can be applied for only by folks who are coded as independent artists within Smart Simple, which is to say that if you have a Smart Simple login that is affiliated as an organization, that you are not able to access this program. No problem, quite simple. Just create a new additional ID, Smart Simple ID, as an independent artist so that you can access the program. Once you are inside Smart Simple as an independent artist, this is more or less what you'll see. It's your welcoming dashboard. And you'll notice on this particular screenshot, the bottom left-hand corner, there's a series of funding opportunities. That number will change a little bit as grants open and close. But inside that number, you click on the numeral 11 here, where the red arrows are facing. You will be able to find and begin an application for the Folklife Apprenticeship. If you have any of the current applications open, they will show up as listed under in progress here, also under my applications. And once you have submitted it, it will increase this submitted button to 1 to however many applications you're making. Because of course, although you can only apply for the Folklife Apprenticeship once a cycle, you are able to apply for additional MSAC grant programs at the same time. We hope that you will do so. Let's move into application strategies. This is a series of recommendations that we have compiled over the years of providing technical assistance to applicants. And this list also derives from information that applicants themselves have shared with us as things that they found particularly helpful. So you're receiving this information as compiled from different perspectives. First, we strongly recommend that you write your application assuming that the panelists know absolutely nothing about your tradition. Now, of course, we're going to try to we are going to try to seat panelists who know something about a traditional art, but given the breadth of traditions that we make available to the breadth of traditions that are eligible to apply, it's quite impossible for any seated group of panelists to know everything about all traditions, even though they might know, for example, bomba and plena very strongly, or Hindustani classical music very strongly. They might not know other things. So assume a ground knowledge of zero for any specific tradition, and write as though you're writing for a 101 level course, a 101. General broad strokes about the tradition. Within the application, there's also the option to include what we call supplemental materials. These are audio excerpts, these are videos, these are text-based materials, articles, letters of recommendation, what have you. Smart Simple and the Great Guidelines have very clear recommendations and directions on what to upload and how to upload them. And we recommend that you do use these optional supplemental materials section to provide panelists with a taste of what it is that you are proposing to do, what this tradition is. A taste as opposed to a whole meal. Panelists have a large number of applications to review. They're not going to be able to review everything if you supply them with hundreds of hours of materials to review. And again, the grant guidelines have very specific recommendations on what folks can and cannot submit. There's a certain amount of time of material that can be submitted. And again, that's all very clearly laid out in the grant guidelines. But we recommend that you provide tastes, pique folks' interests, but don't give them an entire smorgasbord, so to speak. I mentioned earlier that myself and my colleagues at MSAC provide what we call technical assistance. This is a variety of things fall under this umbrella of technical assistance, and they can include reviewing pros of applications. It can involve reviewing budgets or discussing budgets. It can be discussing application strategies. It can be talking about ways to frame narratives about a tradition, a whole variety of different discussions that we can have over email, that we can have in person, that we can have during virtual or phone conversations. And we recommend that you access this technical assistance multiple times. Consider myself and my colleagues at MSAC to be a regularly renewable resource. We want to hear from you multiple times during the grant application and not just once. Consistently, when folks bring to us what they want to work on, what their goals are, and discuss with us what those are, we're able to help them improve the applications so that the likelihood that they receive the grant increases each time. So again, our job descriptions literally include this. We are literally paid to work with you, to provide you technical assistance. It's one of our favorite things to do, actually. And we function as your cheerleaders. Really, myself and my colleagues at MSAC, we are cheering you on to try to get you funding. So you're never taking up our time. We want to work with you. Please don't think you are taking up space that is not yours. Please come to us as a resource. Finally, as I mentioned earlier with our Open Maryland Traditions call for panelists, we do recommend that you apply to be a panelist. And I think that this Arts Relief-funded special Folklife Apprenticeship cycle is really an ideal time to do that. We've heard from a number of folks that doing the work behind the scenes as a panelist provides them with an invaluable perspective on how to improve their application. And many folks have done panel work and then gone on to write successful grant applications, both for Folklife Apprenticeship and for other MSAC grant programs and other grant programs funded by other agencies. It's a very useful way to see behind the scenes and to really get a sense of what it is panelists want so that you can then create applications that are tailored towards those needs. As I mentioned, Maryland Traditions currently has an open call for panelists that closes August 31st. It's a very quick application through Smart Simple, so we do strongly encourage you to make that application. As I think you already know, my name is Ryan Koons, and I'm MSAC Folklife Specialist. This is my contact information. You can also find my contact information available on msac.org, along with contact information from my colleagues. Do please be in touch. Again, we are all literally paid to help you, and we very much want to do so. So any questions, comments, concerns, do please be in touch. I'd like to open it now to anyone who has any questions. I did see one or two in the chat, which I'll pull up now. Clarification questions, whether or not you can only apply once per cycle. Yes, we can, so eligibility for Folklife Apprenticeship allows folks to participate in only one Folklife Apprenticeship per annual cycle. So that means that anyone who is currently holding a fiscal 23 Folklife Apprenticeship is not eligible to apply for the COVID Arts Relief-funded cycle, but they are able to apply for the fiscal 24 cycle that opens in March. So yes, folks can only receive one per cycle as opposed to applying only once per cycle. Thank you, Chad, for catching that misspeak on my part. Does anyone else have any other clarification questions? Anything else they want to discuss? Feel free to unmute and ask, or if you prefer to pop it into, yes, Laurel, please go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I have to admit that I feel very discouraged because, well, my tradition is something that I was brought into in 1979. It's through the Central Asian Ustaz Shagir tradition, which is master disciple. But my master's teachers are in Uzbekistan, and some of them have already passed away. And some I still work with. And the government of Uzbekistan even has given me a medal to acknowledge my contribution to their dance culture. But it is pretty worthless here. And I don't know if I should even try to get this grant, because I'm not sure that I would fit within the framework. I have one approach is I have a new student who's extremely talented, and she lives in Silver Spring, so she would fit that Maryland requirement. But I don't know. I created, as you might recall, last year, a video that spoke about the different Silk Road communities that live in Maryland, some of them pretty rare, like the Zoroastrians. And when one of my colleagues nominated me for a different award, which I understand it's not the same thing, but it's Maryland Traditions, that he shared some of the feedback with me, and two things left me completely bewildered. One question is, how is dance a folk tradition? Which I had no way of answering. I was so shocked. And the other one was, well, what communities are these? Is this tradition really connected with any of the local communities? And I thought I had outlined that pretty clearly in the video that I made. So, my time might be spent better elsewhere, or maybe I need to live elsewhere. Maybe I am thinking of relocating back to Uzbekistan, where I lived for several years. So I just don't know. I mean, how could I? I'm trained in this. I'm currently finishing a book on Uzbek women's dance traditions that will be published by Bloomsbury Academic Press. I have another chapter coming out in another book that speaks of Silk Road dance traditions, but these are not native to Maryland.
So you've asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, I did.
Thank
Sorry.
you. And I want to, if I forget to respond to any of them, do please jog my memory.
Okay.
So first off, the award that you mentioned, the Heritage Award, we will be doing another info session on that later. I would recommend that you connect with me offline out of this webinar to discuss that.
Okay.
We have recently put that program through a program revision, so it'll look a little bit differently than you have previously seen. And we hope that as a result of that program revision, that it'll therefore be more equitably accessible. So I have some ideas that we can talk about one-on-one about that later. As far as your other question, specifically regarding the Folklife Apprenticeship, unfortunately, we are held to the requirement that folks, both master artists and apprentice artists, be residents of the state of Maryland. I'll be quite frank with you that I personally chafe against this particular requirement. There are many contexts in which that particular eligibility requirement does begin to fall apart, but the rationale is that since MSAC grant funding derives from the state, which is to say that it derives from state taxpayers, that money must stay in state, which is, again, the reason that almost all MSAC programs require Maryland residency. That said, there are two different MSAC grant programs, not the Folklife Apprenticeship, but two other programs that might allow you to study with someone who lives outside of the state, whether outside of Maryland or outside of the US. And they are the Creativity Grant and the Professional Development Grant. And I would encourage you to, again, connect with us by email. My colleagues who run both of those programs, Emily Sollenberger and Laura Weiss, have a number of ideas on ways that an application can be made that will very strongly allow or very strongly narrate someone to be able to do that kind of study. But unfortunately, the Folklife Apprenticeship is not the place for it. The other, let's see, you asked also about a student of yours who is also a Maryland resident. That is eligible, very much so. And I would encourage you to apply for that. And if you're interested, I'm more than happy, as I mentioned earlier, to provide you technical assistance by reviewing any drafts that you want me to look over. Were there any other questions that you asked that I missed?
No, I think you got everything, but I'll just add the one thing that my dance company that I founded 27 years ago in Maryland, and we rehearse in Maryland at Joe's Movement Emporium, as an entity, as a Maryland Performing Arts Group, that's a Maryland nonprofit organization. If I took my training that I've received over these past 40 years and set up a program to take them through some of the traditional steps of training in the Uzbek tradition, because they're a Maryland entity, would they qualify, even though not every single dancer lives in Maryland, although many do?
There are two answers to that. The
Yes
first,
and no.
yes, and kind of, which is not quite the same. So the first part answer is that Folklife Apprenticeships are designed to be one individual plus one individual. And
Tradition, yeah.
although there are many different traditions that do require that necessarily occur within community, which is to say that there's more than one person involved, or they're more than just the master and the artist, more than just the master artist and the apprentice artist involved in that particular learning relationship. For example, last cycle we had African American community quilting. So we had a context in which the master artist was teaching the learner artist, the apprentice artist, within the context of a very specific localized community in Baltimore. So the main pedagogical relationship that we funded was master artist and apprentice artist, but they were working in a larger context. I say this because because using Folklife Apprenticeship funding, as you were suggesting perhaps, to fund courses that involve multiple people was not strictly eligible. But if you wanted to work, for example, with one specific student who also happens to be a member of your school or your program, that is eligible and they can continue working within that context. There are, of course, other MSAC grant programs that could fund that kind of master artist working with many different apprentice artists, one of which would be grants for organizations, which funds organizations' operating budgets, which could therefore fund this kind of additional program if you're not already offering it, or could expand it if that's something else you wanted to do. Or the other option grant-wise is Creativity Grant, as I mentioned earlier, which is designed to be MSAC's most flexible grant. It's very deliberately widely defined so that folks can engage either as independent artists on very specific projects they want to work on or more generalized projects, or if you're an organization applying, and Laurel, you could apply as either since you have the organization that you run and you are yourself also an independent artist, that also offers operating budget support. So a couple different options there for ways that might allow you to move forward technically outside of the sometimes confining definition of what's possible within a Folklife apprenticeship. So again, do please feel free. I'm happy to set up a time to chat one-on-one if you want. We can go through very specific details and drill down much more deeply into the details if that's of interest.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. We still have plenty of time if anyone else has any other questions or folks want to ask additional questions. Well, if not, I think we'll just close up. I thank you all so very much for coming, and yet again, another invitation to please be in touch. Here's my contact information again, and you can also find it on msac.org. We look forward to hearing from you all, and thank you for your time.